Hi, my name is Dr. Kim O'Donnell, and I'm here to talk to you today about Learning for All as part of our Westbrook School Department community conversation. In Westbrook, we have one promise: the best education for all for life. And the context of our work with students, is rooted in history, policy, and law. Let's think about a public school for a moment. In this particular diagram, I've outlined some specific laws, policies, and court cases that largely dictate how we operate in our schools. I'd like you to pay close attention to the effect date of these particular policies, cases, and laws. Some of them came into play as early as 1954. Some are more recent, but the bottom line is they've been around for a long time and have had a long-standing impact on how schools operate. Taking a look at the graphic in the purple box, you'll see three particular acts that are related to students with disabilities. They outline our legal expectations for providing a free and appropriate education for students who come to school and have special needs. They also speak to the ability to access school. If we move to the orange block, or what I've titled the Access and Equity block, you'll note some court cases and two acts. The Brown court case is pretty famous, and a lot of people know about it, but it basically ended segregation in our schools. The Civil Rights Act and the Elementary Secondary Education Act also speak to access, but equity as well. In Westbrook, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act is a very important piece of legislation, as we are receivers of a substantial grant that allows us to provide support for students. If we move to the middle of the graphic, you'll see Bostock versus Clayton County and the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. The Bostock case basically told schools they can't discriminate against students who identify as LGBTQI+. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Act is actually really significant in Westbrook and across the state, as we've noticed increased populations of homeless families. McKinney-Vento makes sure that we provide equitable access and support for these students. If we move over to the blue block, you'll see a court case and another act. Pyler versus Doe is about immigration. Public schools are not allowed to deny a student a free and appropriate education based on their immigration status. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is all about protecting students' privacy and their right to education. And then finally, in the block at the top, we have three different items related to equality, English language supports, and accessibility. Title IX, which most people equate with sports, actually states that we, as an organization that receives federal funds, cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. Lau versus Nichols set into place the requirement that when students enter school and have a low English language proficiency, we are required to support those students. And finally, the Equal Educational Opportunities Act is all about removing barriers for students so they can access school. And some of those barriers can include language. The bottom line is all of these things together impact how our schools have to run. The laws and policies collectively establish a foundation for an equitable and inclusive public education for children in the United States, not just Maine. So, where do we start in Westbrook? Well, we work backwards. We start knowing the end, which is the vision of a graduate. When you leave Westbrook with a diploma in hand, we expect that you are a clear and effective communicator, a self-directed and lifelong learner, a creative and practical problem solver, a responsible and involved citizen, and an integrative and informed thinker. So, how does the journey of learning look? Well, we start with a lot of intentional planning for the various needs of students across the grade levels. Our planning is tied to the Maine learning standards. And if you recall the Common Core standards, that's actually what the Maine learning standards are based on. Following that, We develop our course blueprints. Now, that sounds pretty technical, but it's not. Course blueprints simply are that blueprints of how a course is taught, regardless of your grade. Those are available on our website under the Documents tab. And then finally, we do a lot of intentional planning around instruction and support, from classrooms to programs to meet the needs of all students who come through our doors. Some students come to school and make steady, predictable progress as they move through the grades. Other students, unfortunately, don't. Yet we're required to provide assistance to ensure that they can access their programming. Assistance and support are personalized to the needs of a student, not generalized. Some require very little, some require a lot. Regardless, we have to provide opportunities for our students. The lines on this slide illustrate what people might think a K-12 education is like, the straight yellow line. But actually, I think any teacher would tell you, and if you reflect on your own educational experience, K-12 education is kind of an up and down, some lows, some highs, but our goal is to get you from the start to the end. So, how do we achieve the vision of the graduate? Well, it starts as early as pre kindergarten. Some of our students are fortunate and able to access private pre kindergarten outside of school. We are fortunate to have a partnership with Opportunity Alliance, Opportunity Alliance that allows us to offer 2 pre-K programs in our schools. We move on to the elementary level, grades K to 4. During those years, we provide foundational literacy and math instruction. We expose students to science and social studies. We help students with their social emotional development. We introduce art, music, physical education, STEAM, and library. And of course, we provide student support, counselors, nurses, Title I supports, multilingual supports, and special services. We also introduce intramurals, opportunities for students to participate in clubs or activities after school. That sets a foundation as they move to the middle level. Now, let's talk about that for a moment. At the middle level, we build on elementary foundations of literacy and math and expand science and social studies. We continue working on social emotional development. We offer art, music, physical education, STEAM, library, and band and chorus, and of course, similar school supports for our students. We also expand intramurals at the middle level, more clubs, more choices for students to explore things that they're interested in. And we offer interscholastic sports, meaning that students can compete with other middle schools in our division. And finally, at the high school and our vocational center, students come in prepared to take elective and required courses. There's lots of student choice as well. We offer diploma endorsements at our high school and pathways through the trades. Some of our diploma endorsements include the Seal of Biliteracy, Future Teachers, STEAM. We have expanded opportunities with music and art, and anyone that knows the Westbrook Band knows that we have an excellent program. And of course, expanded student support services, school counselors, nurses, alternative learning, aspirations, multilingual services, special services. We support all of our students. So what do they look like? And how do we fund those supports? Well, starting at the elementary level, we have Title I. And if you recall, at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA. That provides grant money for our Title I services. Title I is federally funded, not funded through our general budget. Title I teachers are generalists who serve students based on their needs in math and literacy. It's important to note that the funding in this particular grant is variable and based on poverty levels in the city of Westbrook. On the left, you'll note the percentage of students at each elementary school that receive support from a Title I teacher. We move on to special services, or what you might know better as special education. Special services spans grades K through 12. students requiring an individualized education plan or an IEP, so it ensures that they can access their education. Just like a general classroom, the span of needs varies from pull-out services for part of their day to a fully self-contained classroom. Students with IEPs may also require supports like occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. These are specialty areas, and therefore we must hire appropriately licensed staff to provide these services. How do we fund these programs? Well, special education is funded in two streams. First, through IDEA, which is a federal grant. And then the bulk of our funding comes through the general fund, or what we call the local budget. Right now, in the city of Westbrook, almost 27% of our student body receives support through special services. Below is a historical picture of student needs, and note that we have increased nearly 10% over the last 7 years. Within those needs, we've also increased in the complexity of needs that students come to school with. And finally, we have our multilingual program. Multilingual learners are students with a primary or home language other than English who are in the process of learning English. These students come to school with many valuable assets, and our high-quality programs leverage those assets through individual supports and equitable academic opportunities. Multilingual students are required to receive English language development services from certified teachers, as well as supports throughout their instructional day provided by all of their teachers. Our multilingual program is also funded through two streams. First, through the ESEA grant, like Title I, and through our general fund, or what we call the local budget. In the ESEA grant, we can purchase things that are needed for professional development or materials or even our coach. However, we cannot purchase teachers because of the restrictions in that particular grant. Our general fund funds our staff in our multilingual program. Currently, 24% of our population requires this type of support. As of January 24th, there are 560 students identified as multilingual in Westbrook, which is 24% of our total population. You should note that our identified population has more than doubled in the last 7 years. So what's the challenge with this? Well, Westbrook is a growing city, and that's incredible. But it's changed how our community is viewed when federal and state funding formulas are applied. Our student enrollment is slowly increasing for the first time in a number of years. And finally, for the past several years, we've observed a trend of increasing needs in our student body. And as you know, based in policy and law, we are required to provide supports for all of the students who come through our doors. This certainly has budget implications. We must provide teachers and students with appropriate materials. Training and development is critical, so we're implementing programs with fidelity and efficacy. Athletics and extracurricular activities are very important to the city of Westbrook and our schools. And finally, we create learning environments, safe transportation, great nutrition, and we have the cost of running schools, much like you have the cost of running your home. Heating oil, electricity, all of the things. And finally, one of the biggest impacts on our general budget are the holes created by reductions in federal funds. But at the end of the day, our goal is to provide for all of our students the best education for all for life. Thanks for listening to my presentation. Certainly reach out if you have any questions.